Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to continue our work in biology by taking a look at succession and biomes today. And succession is how organisms and the ecosystems that we look at change over time. And biomes are just different geographical areas that show different varieties of ecosystems. So we're going to take a look at those today and try to get a good understanding of how those work and what we need to know for those particular subjects. Our goals today: you should be able to predict how life changes in an ecosystem over time. And additionally, you should be able to differentiate the factors that determine different biome types. So, let's take a look and get an understanding of succession and what succession is. Succession is the change in an ecosystem over time due to changing biotic and abiotic factors. So if we take a look on the right here, we can see over the period of time, going from left to right, that an ecosystem can significantly change. An empty field over 50 to 100 years can be fully blossomed with many different varieties of shrubs, trees, and grasses. So over a period of time, different organisms, different species grow within the ecosystem, and you can see the change that occurs over time. We start off very small with lichens and mosses, which are really, really tiny photosynthetic organisms. But over time, those lichens and mosses die, help generate soil, and as a result, we start to see more grasses, herbs, shrubs, and tree seedlings, and these can be brought over into the soil by bird droppings. They can be brought over by birds maybe dropping something out of their mouth, or it could be brought over simply by the wind. So these seeds don't just magically appear, they're brought over by other organisms. But as time continues, we start to see different species of organisms because the environment is better suited for those different plants to survive within the environment over time. So it's very much a slow and steady process. One thing to understand about succession is that it is very orderly, it is predictable, and it is very exact. We are able to very specifically determine what is going to happen in an ecosystem based upon the principles of ecological succession. Primary succession is the establishment of a new community which has never before housed life. So if we look on the picture, there's grass that's growing on some sidewalk or on some pavement. The pavement has never before had life on it before, but grass is starting to grow, and you can also start to see some weeds growing. These are the first steps towards succession. If we let these grasses grow over a long period of time, there's a potential that we could see much larger species of plants growing there, as well as different organisms like animals. Secondary succession occurs on land that has once had life before, typically after a natural disaster. So you think of a forest fire. Forest fires completely devastate the land, eliminating everything that was once living on that particular land. However, trees and shrubs and organisms do grow back. It occurs at a much faster rate than primary succession, but the process is still the same. You'll get the small grasses that will grow first before their larger trees start to grow within the ecosystem. Primary succession happens on new land, while secondary succession happens on land which has once had life before. So again, the smaller plants typically grow first, and then the larger plants will grow afterwards. After a long period of time, we start to see that succession starts to slow down, and that new organisms typically aren't found. This is known as a climax community, where the community has become stable, it has become mature. These are things like large forests, where there are large trees that have been there for hundreds of years. Not much change takes place in these particular ecosystems because they already have the large trees and are very stable. The only time you would ever see a change is if some type of ecological disaster happened, like a forest fire or somebody cutting down the trees. Then the process of succession would restart. However, a climax community is what is found after a stable, mature community long after succession has taken place. And these climax communities are also called biomes. And biomes are areas with similar climate conditions. So we have many different biomes, many different varieties of climax community that are determined by temperature and precipitation. By looking at the graph on the right, we can see that precipitation and temperature have a very large impact on what biome and climax community you will find in a particular geographic region. For example, a very low temperature with very little precipitation is called a tundra, right? The average temperature is negative 10 degrees Celsius and the annual precipitation is less than 100 centimeters. However, if we look at the very, very top of the graph, you see a tropical rainforest, which has the highest temperature and the highest amount of precipitation. Again, all of these biomes are simply determined by how much precipitation falls and how much temperature is present. So where would you expect to see a higher number of organisms? In a place where there is high temperature and high precipitation, or low temperature and low precipitation? Well, if we look here at some of the biome facts that we want to look at, the taiga has a lot of evergreen trees, so just something to think about. This is the typical biome that you find in Canada and parts of the western United States. Temperate forest is what we find here in Indiana. And tropical rainforest has the highest biodiversity, again answering the question that I just asked, due to the high amounts of precipitation and high temperature. The higher the precipitation and the higher the temperature, typically, the more biodiversity you are going to find within an area, the higher number of organisms you'll find within the tropical rainforest. Aquatic biomes are important to understand as well. Biomes are not just ecosystems found on land. There are aquatic biomes as well, and they are typically divided into two specific stages. One is called the photic zone, where light is able to penetrate the water, and another one is known as the aphotic zone, where light cannot reach that particular depth of the water. The photic zone and aphotic zone are important because only photosynthetic organisms can live within the photic zone, right? Because that is where the light is being shined. So photosynthetic organisms cannot live in the aphotic zone because there is no light. So just some things to think about when we talk about the different types of biomes that exist within the world. So hopefully you're able to understand how an ecosystem can change over time, starting with small grasses and able to build itself into a large, stable climax community in an ecosystem. Additionally, you should be able to differentiate the factors that determine the different biome types that are found throughout the globe. Hopefully now you understand these things and do well on both the video quiz and the mastery quiz. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.